Great. Well, welcome. Bob Mosher here. And I don't get to say this often, but greetings from St. John's Virgin Islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm actually here with my wife for a 4-day trip. And look what we can do today. I mean, honestly, when else in humankind could we get together on a Wednesday afternoon when I'm sitting here in this beautiful place and we're all scattered around the world? It's just spectacular. It's an exciting time. In our industry, the tools are like none other. But at the same time, we've got to put together methodology and approaches and things that enable those tools. You know, my dad, when I was at Microsoft for a number of years, I was a senior director there under Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. And when I was working with one of the product groups one time, the individual from Word said, look, just because we gave them Word didn't mean they became writers. And such is the same with technology, right? And so methodology begets technology. One of my favorite phrases, one of my dear colleagues once told me. And that's what we're going to talk about today, this power of workflow learning and how it really is been around forever, frankly. This is my 40th year, friends, in education. Do you believe that? September 6th, 40 years ago in September, I walked into a 3rd grade class in Warsaw, New York, to be a 3rd grade teacher. And here I sit 40 years later, before all of you in this event. It's a remarkable time. How do we enable this is the point. Most people get it. Most people understand the potential of it. But what I want to go into today is, you know, why should we care now? Why is it so important in the world we live in today? And more importantly, how do we help convince others, frankly? Right. I just got off a call a moment ago. I'll talk a little bit about it at the end. And one of the women said, you know, we're all believers. Our anxiousness is how do we get others to let us do this thing, right? And that's important. Any kind of mindset shift in education is a heavy lift. And so why should we, and we doesn't mean just us, we means those we serve. Why is this really something to, if nothing else, try? I've been doing it for 20 years only in the world we live in today. Number 2, what are we creating? So I'm a big vocabulary guy. I believe that it's so important to have words, vocabulary, principles, concepts to share a common dialogue about this. We'll go deep there. This 3rd bullet is the smallest of my presentation. As you'll see at the very end, we have a 4-month-long certificate program on this, a virtual certificate program that you can sit through for 4 months, build a project, do this kind of stuff. I mean, guys, I got you for an hour. Right. So I want to be realistic about what I'm able to go into here, but I do want to have you leave this with nothing. It's nothing else but the idea and understanding of the principles that make this unique and maybe different from what you're doing now. And by all means, last, we'll kind of talk our way out and give you next steps. By all means, use the chat. Love to hear how you're doing. I'm going to keep that off to the side. We'll do a number of those things in here to be sure we engage throughout the event. So why should we care? Let's get personal for a moment. Would you do this? We're going to put a poll on your screen in just a moment. What we want you to do is pick 2. It's a multiple choice poll. Think about yourself as a learner. Forget L&D, forget those that you serve or e-learning, classroom, whatever you do. Think about your life as a learner. What are the 2 most effective approaches you have used to learn, remember, and look at the capital word, apply the greatest performance challenges in your life? And these are the choices we're going to give you. And notice number 9 is an other, because this is not by any means an exhaustive list. So friends, would you put the poll on the screen, please? And you can pick 2. So put a check mark and again, yourself as a learner, pick the 2 things that you feel were most powerful for you to learn, not just learn and not just remember, but to apply. I'll give you a chance to pick a couple. And in a moment, we will show the results. Okay, friends, would you put on the screen how we're doing?
27 response, but 90%. So thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. And here we go. Number 1, 60% of you said that on-the-job training. 52% of you trial in the workflow. 3rd, coaching, and then e-learning, some classroom, and even some virtual. Good. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, mentoring. Sorry. I had to scroll up. Mentoring, 33%. So the top three, surprise, surprise, friends. If you want to close that on your screen, I have done this poll for 3 years. Pre-COVID, during COVID, I've done it all over the world. I even did it for 8-year-olds once. I actually had 8-year-olds answer this question, and they could not answer they didn't get number 4 because they didn't know what on-the-job training meant. So I kind of had to make that a little more contextual for them. But unanimously, check this out. Number 1, number 2, number 3. And if you look at the results in your poll, friends, you literally map to this yet again. A distant 4th, 5th, or at all are these. So friends, sometimes I'm asked, how do you help get stakeholders to want to do this? How do you get buy-in? This is one of my favorite things that I do with those that I serve is I'm trying to get away from training only for my deliverables. And I ask them, I give them the exact same question, the exact same poll. And every single time I do, the same answers happen. And so my question to them is, then why do you keep asking me for green stuff? Why, frankly, in many L&D departments, is the majority of my deliverables, the bulk of my solutions, the green stuff, not the blue stuff. And I don't know if you lived this in your lifetime before, but look at that quote at the top. I'd like 5 days of training on blah, 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 blah. Leadership, sales, Excel, onboarding, right? Give me in chat. Anyone ever get this question come into your office? Give me a yes or no in chat, would you? Don't do a poll. Just give me if you've ever encountered this quote. Yeah, look at you. Right. Guys, this has always been a very yeah. 1 or 2 days. Look at you, Pam. Right. I mean, again, this is a very telling question, not about what they asked, not about, notice the dot part. It's not about the end of the sentence. The troublesome part, friends, is the beginning. I don't know any other profession in the world where people walk in and predetermine the outcome. I don't go to a doctor and say, I want 9 Advil because my arm hurts. I go and say, my arm hurts. And then I let the medical professional diagnose, analyze, and prescribe the appropriate solution for the context of my problem. We are painted into a corner, friends, in what I call the training mindset. We have taught people that we serve, candidly. A lot of this is on us to come into our office, and ask for a training deliverable before any analysis has been done. And look on the screen. This is what happens. Look at these things on the left. You see the blue boxes at the bottom, those 5? Those are common things that we see in classroom instruction. Kind of 5 buckets, right? You discuss, you ask questions, you show and tell, you get feedback. Do this in the chat for me, would you please? Which of those 5 things do you think learners like the most or would love the most in the classroom? See the things in the blue boxes? Give me in chat. Which ones do you think learners want the most? Look at you guys. Storytelling. And I think that's a version of discuss, Pam, right? Look at you. Discuss and practice, feedback. Yeah. You guys, absolutely. Absolutely. But I love Pam's comment earlier about, I think it was Pam, instead of 5 days, it's like 2 nowadays. The danger, friends, in all this stuff is that I don't know about you, but we are given less and less time to deliver anything anymore. But no one's taking anything off the list, right? So here's what happened. This is an actual example I'm going to talk about now and at the end of my presentation. This is from a project we were called into to do and apply the principles we're going to talk about today. Look at this course. Look at this crazy thing. 5 days, designed traditionally in an ISD, instructional systems design way. It had grown over years. This was a decade-old course to 1,000 PowerPoint slides. They had to do 33 slides an hour or a slide every 1.8 minutes, or they couldn't finish them. How's that? Right? Well, guess what? Look at the breakdown, friends. Look at the breakdown here. Look how insane that is. And by the way, I don't blame the instructor. That's a lot of content. Would you agree, friends, that we historically, when we're a one-hit wonder, candidly, and training is the tip of the sword, we overteach. We overteach, even in a much calmer course than this, right? Here's the problem, friends. We are in this cover it phenomenon. Have you ever heard this from your SMEs, your subject matter experts, right? When you sit down with them and say, well, you want 5 days of training on leadership? what do you think it should be? And you get a bunch of good leaders in a room, and they give you a lot of things to cover. And the assumption is, friends, that it's going to be a course in e-learning, a VILT. It's going to be a training deliverable. And that is so unfair to training. And we painted ourselves into this corner where that is how we are known for covering stuff, right? We got to get out of that world. We have to get into another idea of saying, look, before we get to the deliverable, let's talk more about the outcome. To do that, three things have to happen. Number one, we have got to be seen differently. We've got to stop the 5 days of training thing. We got to get to where they come in our office. I'm going to tell a story later about a learning professional in a hospital that this was notorious for this. They walked in her office 3 days, 5 days, 60 learnings, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? We've got to.
It seems we lost Bob for a minute. I'm trying to figure out where he is.
Oh.
Hey, Bob, we lost the sound a little bit. Maybe the last 20 seconds.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back now.
Okay. Sorry about that. Better?
Yep.
Okay, good. So we have to, friends, if we want to design something different, we have to have a different design approach. It's as simple as that, right? And I get, sometimes people get upset with me about this because I'm not dispelling AUDI as a methodology. It just doesn't do what we're talking here, to be honest. I'm going to give you a different flavor. And lastly, oh boy, I'm not going to go deep into this one at all today, but it really has to be on the slide, because if you want to play in the world of workflow learning, you have to be able to understand the journey into governance and maintenance of content, because you're going to host a lot of stuff that frankly you don't make. So what's the journey to doing this? Again, another slide I use, friends, when I'm trying to help people understand why 5 days of anything is not enough, because that's the first part of this journey. And learners actually don't stop there. See across the top? Learners are on a three-part journey. Sure, they have to become masters of content. They have to get it. Training's terrific at that, right? But training doesn't mean you're competent. See competency? And by the way, in the world you live in today, how about remaining so? It's one thing, you can be competent on Friday, but if you didn't get the memo, you're incompetent on Monday, right? So the danger here is we use these words, and this is where I'm going to get back to vocabulary. These are the tools of our trade. And if we want to be allowed to build something else, we've got to grow our toolkit. And dare I say, again, I'm going to challenge you on a few things today, friends. Dare I say, these are not my number one tools anymore. My goal when I do solutions in workflow is to use as few of these as possible. I still use them, but to use as few of these as possible. Right? Because friends, that's not enough. Mastery is not enough. And this is where we get ourselves in trouble. And sometimes we get disciplined for, frankly, because the reality is we've all seen the Eppinghaus curve, right? When I'm done after this hour, you're going to remember maybe half the stuff I told you. I know that. I get that. If I'm lucky, half the stuff. And by tomorrow, by Monday, you may remember one slide of my presentation. Why? Because this is not a competency model, friends. This is a mastery awareness model, frankly. But that's good. It's a part of the journey. But my question, you see the black question mark? When I go into organizations to help them with workflow learning, that's what Apply Synergies, my company, does. And one of my first questions is, what's your transfer strategy? Or, and more importantly, in the world we live in today, what's your sustainment strategy? And the irony is, in many L&D teams we talk to, there really isn't anything in the blue. They got a lot of stuff in the green, but there really isn't anything in the blue. And that's where this entire presentation is going, right? We need to flip and add not experiential learning, because that happens out here, right? We need to add, there it is, performance support workflow frameworks. And again, this gets back to vocabulary. We have to have it. We have to call it something, right? And this is what we use when we're pitching it, if you will, to those that we serve. Now, do me a favor, will you, friends? Look at the chart for a second. I'm going to go to a new one in a moment, and I want to see if you can see 3 things change. 3 things about this chart. This is a training first chart. Build for training first and Some to no, transfer, and sustain. If you add that green bar at the bottom, watch what happens. Watch the chart. You see? Let me go back. That's the chart without the green bar at the bottom. You know that? Here's the chart with the green bar. Give me in chat 3 things you saw change. Or one of them. In chat. Time to competency. Yep. More focus on. Reduced training. Significant more time to sustain and learn. Increase in sustainment. Sustainment is key. Rochelle, love that. Sustainment, friends, should be our goal. If we can't, in the end, show and point to, here's an acronym, ROI on sustainment, we failed. Because the world our performers live in today is one of sustainment all the time. Because the currency and legacy of content is as short as it's ever been, I would argue, in the history of content, right? So 3 things. Number 1, training's reduced by half, because here's the thing, friends, this is not a training first model. It's a transfer and sustain first model. And if you do that, if you target that, if you don't cover it all in training, your training can reduce significantly because it doesn't carry the weight of the world. Number 2, quicker time to competency, which is really why we're in the business of doing, right? We're measured by competency, not mastery. And then, of course, it's a sustainment strategy. This is a teach to fish, not feed them one, which is what the green's about. And again, the green's okay, but it is no longer the tip of the sword. So I show this to those that came in my room and said, I want 5 days of training on something. And I say, really? Really? This is what you want? This is what you're asking for? You want 5 days of training? So I don't care how long that green thing is, but let me tell you what happens after training. And I show them this. And I say, by the way, this isn't training's fault. This is not training's fault. But don't you want this? Didn't you come to my office because you want this? We have a leadership issue. People aren't selling well. Our customer service reps don't answer calls well. We're trying to onboard people to our company for the first time. Friends, those are performance issues, not training issues, right? So we want to change the dialogue into one of let's build for transfer and sustainment first. And yes, yeah, we will still train something. There will always be some degree of training, but it is not the end game. And it is not what you want when you came in here and asked for 5 days, 3 e-learnings, whatever. You're talking about the means, friend, not the ends. And unfortunately, that's kind of where we've guided them. So what do they want? Workflow learning and embedded learning and support in the workflow to be accessed while doing the work. Notice while, right? This is a tool that you learn through doing, experiential learning. E-learning, friends, boy, don't get mad at me. E-learning is not workflow learning. It's in the workflow. It's not while doing the work. If I have a problem with leadership, I don't invoke an e-learning thing and then continue to lead. I stop, take the e-learning, and then I come back to try to do something with it, right? While is very different. So what do you have to make? What's the deliverable then? This is done by designing performance support and an EPSS. Anyone know what that stands for in the chat? Anyone remember that acronym, EPSS? Or what we call now digital.
It looks like we lost Bob again. So looks like we have some technical issues there.
I texted him, Tony, see if he can reconnect quickly. Maybe Wi-Fi on the beach is not that great.
Yeah.
Coach?
Bob, you're back. We lost you for like 30 seconds. No sound.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back now. Yep.
Yes,
Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm sorry.
You get
I've been on-
censored after every other 20 minutes, something like this.
I've been on webinars all morning. My apology. We haven't, this hasn't happened before. So, digital coach, targeted learning, right? Those are the new deliverables of the day. That's blended learning in this domain, friends. You probably heard of blended learning. Blended learning in this world is the combination of a digital coach in the workflow and targeted learning to enable it, right? So, what are we creating? Check out this definition. Might look familiar to some of you. What I'd love you to do is, let me chat over here so I can see it better. Whoops. What words in this paragraph, friends, jump out at you? When you read this paragraph, would you put in chat for me what words jump out at you as the most powerful? Put in chat for me. Integrated, on demand, orchestrated, on demand, integrated. Look at you guys. Yep. Training, support, enable, tools. Love that plural, right? Minimum support. Addie, nice catch. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Gloria Geary, God bless her, right? She wrote a remarkable book. Look at the bottom of her name called Electronic Performance Support Systems. Look at the date, friends, 1991. Some of you on this call may not have been alive in 1991. Honestly. But here's the thing. I've talked to Gloria about this numerous times over the past several decades. The irony is, friends, I would challenge that many L&D teams aren't doing this yet. In 2022, have not met the challenge of this paragraph, right? And guys, you nailed it. Look at all the words that Gloria wrote. I love this paragraph. I've tried a zillion times to redefine what Gloria said brilliantly in 91, and I gave up. Because this is my goal, friends, when I build workflow learning. Look, that's workflow learning. In 1991, this predates the internet. No e-learning, no LMSs, none of that stuff. Really remarkable, right? So how do we do it? Well, it's all about orchestration. It's all about orchestration. This is not orchestration. This is chaos, right? And so for a long time, friends, our thought was, let's just give them stuff. Technology lets us give them stuff, lots of stuff. And what we hear when we go in to do our analysis in something called learning asset analysis of the learners, guys, overwhelmingly, this is what we hear: stop the madness, stop the madness. If you make one more SharePoint site, I'm killing someone. I mean, people, it's not an absence of content, friends. It's an orchestration of that content. Learners have plenty. What they don't have is a meaningful way to consume it. If we could get our arms around what's on my screen, think of how little training you'd have to do. Think about that, friends, really. It's all out there. Steve, I love the picture behind you, books. Steve's got books. You can see Steve's picture. I know how many people on this call remember books, but we used to have something called books. Well, look at all those books behind Steve in his picture. It's not a lack of content. It's getting to the right book, right chapter, right paragraph, right sentence. That's the journey, right? The content exists in most organizations already. We have to design it differently, friends, right? This is about design. So 5 moments. You may have heard this before, right? New and more. Dr. Conrad Gottfredson. What Con said is we've got to start designing for content, context, not content. I love that. Yes, Ariel, does orchestrated content also imply a knowledge management system is needed? Absolutely. But I would argue not the ones of the 90s, if I may. In those of you who know the journey, it was cumbersome. And in many organizations, that discipline has failed, to be honest, because it died under its own weight in many organizations. I mean, friends, I'm not knocking it, because this is a form of knowledge management, right? But there are new tools, new approaches, new methodologies that let us serve these needs better. The first 20 years of my professional career, friends, I focused on moments 1 and 2 all the time. That's 5 days of training. I want 5 days of training on. We want to change the dialogue that people walk in our office and say, darn it, build for apply first. let's minimize, if not skip training, if we can. Let's minimize or skip training if we can. Now, friends, you rarely can, to be completely honest. I'll show why in a moment. But if you shift your mindset and your design approach to apply first, you will build exponentially less new and more. So how do we do that? Well, let's see what's going on out there, friends. Another poll. Where are you on the 5 moments of need journey? If you look at where you are right now in your career, right now in what you build, and it's okay to be honest with any of these 3 answers. If you looked at your deliverables or your learners told you, where would you be? Could you put the poll up, please, friends? Would you be 1, 2, or 3 in where you are now? Are you primarily 1 and 2, which is okay. If you are 1 and 2, that's great. That means you got a lot of stuff to work with. Are you moving into 3 and 5, or are you already at 3? You design for all 5 moments, apply first to start. When we're ready there, friends, could you show us the poll?
We have a 24 response and going, 25.
Brilliant.
Oh, from total, sorry. Yeah.
That's good.
All right.
Let's see what you got. Excellent. Good. And a lot of people often ask, why do I even ask this? Because friends, you got to know where you want to go. You have to know where you are. Right. And by the way, 1 and 2 stuff are 2 of the 5 moments. You can't get to transfer and sustain without train. Right. It's just a new view of those. So let's talk about that new view. Couple principles. Number 1, if you want to do workflow learning as a methodology, there are 4 principles you have to be aware of. Number 1, this is an embedded solution in the flow of work while working. So you have to be sure you can get to that point of need as close to the doing as you can. That's embeddedness. Number 2, when you get stuff there, it has to be only what they want. It has to be contextual to what they're doing. It has to be aligned to where they are in the workflow, nothing more. And you want to give them as little as possible. How's that? We're going to talk about number 3 in detail in a minute. Just enough. Not a lot. And this is hard because in a training mindset, we give them a lot. In fact, more than they need. In a performance mindset, it is a minimalist model. And then last, there it is again. You have to have a curation maintenance strategy. And again, I'm not going to talk about 4 so much today. 1 and 4 are logistics. 2 and 3 are design. But you need all 4 to have workflow learning work. So methodology, ta-da, right? We have to have something that complements, and in some cases, if I may, for me anyway, replaces ADDIE. Because that's what I did. We call it enable. E-N-A-B-L-E. It's top. See, enable design methodology. And it has 3 main parts that I'm going to talk briefly about 2. You have to understand the workflow if you're going to do workflow analysis. Critical skills. Talk about them in a minute. And again, the resources I pointed to in the beginning of this, I'll give you at the end, all this stuff in detail, if you'd like. Rapid workflow analysis. Friends, workflow learning only works if you know the workflow. If you understand the flow of work, right? And by the way, SMEs, who knows what an SME is? Let me know in chat. What is an SME? Brilliant. Single most expert. I like that. Yeah. Here's it. Can I throw a curveball at you? Stop using them so much. How's that? Because here's the problem, friends, with SMEs. They are not your learners. They're SMEs. And there's some pretty staggering research out there, friends, that shows that SMEs have automated up to half or more of what it takes to become an SME. Therefore, they're not representing your true learner. So SMEs are okay, but you need to add some other resources in that room. We'll talk about in a minute. If you want to truly get the workflow, and the workflow, I'm going to start really high up here. are made of tasks. Tasks group into processes, and tasks are supported by steps. When you sit down to do a rapid workflow analysis, the first thing you do after you design your scope statement, you got to have something realistic. And you say, now I want to list the tasks you do during the work
We have connection issues again. Sorry, we apologize for that. So just we'll be back soon.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back, Bob.
Oh my gosh, you guys, my apologies. This is my third webinar today in a row. And this is the first time it's happening. I'm so sorry. Let me get back. I can pick right up. Okay. So tasks grouped in processes, and look at the screen, friends. You get these. This is a workflow map, not an outline. That may sound familiar to you. When I used to do ADDIE, I drove towards an outline, right? Lessons, chapters, units, days. Sound familiar? In rapid workflow analysis, you don't move to the next step until you have outlined and drawn, pictorially drawn what the workflow, and this is what I'm going to show you in a minute. This was for auditors in a large auditing firm. This is what they did every day. When we got done with rapid workflow analysis and we showed them this diagram that has all the tasks below it, all the tasks are below those bubbles. They said, yeah, that's, if you look at my work, anytime I walk in the building, I am doing one or more of those things to perform my job. And they look different depending on the context. You have to have a map of the workflow and the tasks associated before you can do any design, or you're shooting in the dark. Number two, critical skills. Once I get my RWA done and I've got all my tasks, now I have to decide, remember there's two parts. There's the digital coach, and then there's the targeted learning. What am I going to do in which? This is about when to cover. Let me be clear here. This is about when to cover, not what to cover. You're going to cover everything. Here's the catch. You're just not going to cover it all in class. You're going to cover everything because the digital coach is going to have everything. You are just not going to cover it all in class. And that's been the goal, right? How do you know the difference? Anyone know where that is? Can anyone give me in chat where that is? Anyone recognize the picture? Any of my world travelers? Vatican City? No, not quite. I'll give you a hint. It rains there a lot. Anyone know where that is? Any of my London fans out there? London, good for you. That's Trafalgar Square in London. Dr. Conrad Gottfredson was in there about 20 years ago, and he was in a bookstore and he found these books. Look at these books. He couldn't believe it. This is a PhD in instructional psychology and technology, PhD. And he couldn't believe someone had written these books. There were 16 of them. Oh my, he's like, oh my gosh, learning a weekend books. That's amazing. Look at the yoga thing. That's terrifying. He couldn't believe that someone had come up with these books. And so he said, I got an 11-hour flight back to Salt Lake City where he lives from Heathrow. So he said, I'm going to read this book. And when I land, I'm going to be a scuba diver. Because that's what the book says I can do. And while reading, he came up upon this word, barotrauma. And it kind of bothered him. So he looked it up and look at it, and they got this. And he said, it's not helping. And then he read this at the end. Yeah, look at you. Blood bubbles. Yeah, big hurt. And he went, oh, okay. And he said, I literally closed the book on the plane and thought, maybe I won't learn everything I need to know about scuba diving and then go out and try it. But friends, here's the irony. People laugh at this story. People go, oh my gosh, who would ever do that from a book? Can I kind of challenge you on that one? Our classes are books. Our e-learnings are books. We take people through chapters, lessons of all it takes to be a good leader. The 7 pillars of leadership, how to sell, and we give them a good book. But in that class, they learn scary stuff like borrow trauma and other things, right? And they have to go back and apply things as dangerous as borrow trauma. And we are not in transfer and sustain with them. So what Khan came up with is this wonderful rubric. This is such a powerful rubric. What he realized is all tasks are important. Listen to this. All tasks are important, but not all tasks are created equal in the consequence of their outcome. I'll say it again. All tasks are important. An SME will tell you they want all tasks covered. I get that. But what I'm trying to decide now is, when do I cover what best? So that when you go out and perform in the workflow, you can not hurt yourself and others, or learn the best way you can. And remember back to the survey I gave you guys in the first one, the 9 questions? You all unanimously voted that on-the-job training, trial and error, were the best teachers you ever had. But here's the problem, friends. You can't do that to people with something that's a 5, 6, or 7. Because look at the outcome. Read underneath those boxes. Catastrophic is really bad. Catastrophic is borrow trauma, right? Catastrophic is borrow trauma, right? So we have to have a way, friends, to vet this so that we teach 5, 6, and 7s. And listen to this. We do not, in a class, in an e-learning, in a VILT, teach 1 through 4s. Why? Because if you give them a digital coach, if you design electronic performance support systems, they can learn while doing, and they might screw up, but not die doing it, right? So, digital coach, what is it? 2 clicks, 10 seconds. Access to just what's needed, just in time. Not that slide full of dots. It maps to the 5 moments, and it follows a hierarchy of engagement. Remember the principles? Number 3 was just enough. When you go into a digital coach, it starts in a hierarchical way, and it only gives you and shows you the information you need to get right back to work. That's why we use the pyramid metaphor. The top of the pyramid is very quick, very concise, very job aid-like. But if that's not enough, I can't just leave you there and assume you'll figure it out. I then give you levels of support that help you solve your performance problem. So here's what I'm going to do real quick. I'm going to show you one. Can you see my screen? You see my screen, you guys?
Yes, we can, Bob.
Thanks.
Yes,
Remember this earlier? This was the digital coach, friends, we built from the workflow analysis I showed you earlier. This is an actual digital web-based. This could also be in a handheld. It can be in a tablet, right? Any digital modality. But if I click on plan the review, remember the top of the pyramid? I get the steps. Here's another process chart. If I go into scope, the objectives, steps, see them over here? Here's the 6 steps to do it. 2 clicks. I get the 6 steps. If these are not enough, I can blow them out and I can get detailed steps. Look at this. With each click, friends, I'm going down the pyramid and I'm getting more information. And if you look over here on the right, I can get about things I need to know about the background. I can get standards in a PDF. I can get examples on a website. I can even go out to my LMS and take training. All from the same page, all from the same spot. But here's the thing, friends. Notice how they are clapped. These are closed. These are closed. Because most people, when they get to this point, the steps are enough. But if they're not, we journey deeper into the pyramid. And we go from there. Software, this is built in. This is built in something called Ask Delphi. What I can send you after, friends, is there are there's a lot of tools in this domain, including, frankly, SharePoint and some others that you may already have in-house. But as far as actual purchasable tools, there are 3, and I'll put them in chat in just a bit, that you can look at, and that when we do our work, we use, depending on need. How would a workflow map if it processes? Yeah, AI is really powerful. AI is helping us to automate workflow maps. The problem with where we are in performance support right now, friends, frankly, is that it's very user driven. The users have to click in the coach and invoke it. When we get into AI and machine learning, which we're still at the very, very early stages of, very, very early stages. But as that starts to come to play here, we can not just watch behavior, and all these tools, by the way, watch behavior. All the clicks, it's all data is being captured on the back, but it's still more of a pull than a push. And absolutely, AI and others are going to be more involved in this as we get deeper. So remember this story, friends? Remember how he started out? Remember this class? We took everything I've talked about. We talked about the 5 moments. We got SMEs in a room and users in a room. And we did workflow analysis, critical skills analysis, learning asset analysis. We looked at the domain. We built a digital coach first, and then we built targeted training, which ended up looking like this, friends. Look, the 5 days of training, 1,000 PowerPoint slides went down to 2 days and only 75 slides. Talk about overkill, right? But everything was in the class, because everything until they had a digital coach had to be
Yes, we're sorry we lost Bob again. We're so lucky that we're recording this
covered is
presentation.
in that class. Oh my gosh, gone again?
Yeah, you're back, Bob.
I'm
Just
back, okay.
again, about 10-15 seconds this time, was shorter.
Ah, thank goodness. So friends, that's my deal. That's my spiel for today. Here's a whole bunch of other resources. I'll just click quickly. We have a whole website on this, you guys, called the 5 Moments of Need. It's got blogs. Notice there's podcasts. There's other recorded webinars like the one we're doing for you today. Con and I, Dr. Gottfredson, published an ebook, 100-page ebook with links to tech, links to digital stuff, links to assets. It's free. Go up to the website, download it, free. You see a picture of it there on the right. Today, I wanted you to get started, right? And the slides are in the chat. Thank you, friend. Right? But it's a journey of one step at a time. Questions. We've got 12 minutes left, according to my clock. Questions, reactions. Well, the 5 moments need to apply to general products such as HR. Absolutely. It's funny. One of the classes we get very often to work on is onboarding, because it's so bad, if I may. A lot of onboarding classes. It's funny. We were redesigning an onboarding class, you guys. This is kind of funny, for a large airline in the States. And we had one of the SVPs in the room. It was a 5-day onboarding course. In the middle of the second day, the guy leans over to me and goes, "We don't have onboarding here. We have offboarding." And it was like, he needed to change the whole focus. And so onboarding is a wonderful place to start, because it begins the journey of employment. It is not the end all to onboarding. Onboarding takes months, years. Other questions, comments? Thanks, Max. Anybody else? Reactions?
Yes. Sorry, Bob. Just to follow up on this comment you made about the onboarding project. So one of the steps that you mentioned is trying to do your analysis, your research of what the issues are, try to rely less on SMEs and more on actual observation. But let's say in the case of an onboarding project where you have very general, objectives from an HR department and you have all sorts of workers, wouldn't that be a little bit difficult for you to kind of determine, or would you have to analyze all the different roles in the company in order to be able to try to put together some sort of training that is going to help?
Yeah. Guys, this is the hard answer to the question. Yeah, you do. Because here's the problem, friends. Because the flip side is you have every role, every responsibility in the room, and that will only ever allow you to go so deep into onboarding people. Because once you get a level or two down, it's too varied. So either half the room sits there bored and half the room thinks this is great, and so my question is, where where do we go? So in a lot of cases, what happens, you guys, is remember that is what ends up happening in this model is that as you outline the workflows, and by the way, 2.5 days to 3 days tops to do a workflow analysis, by the way, 2.5, 3 days tops. When you're done and you've got these workflows, what happens is the beginning of onboarding is the, history of the company. Where do I park? What health benefit package do I want to pick? I get that. But then stop, send them back to work now. And in that work, give them workflow support based on the role that they are in. Don't keep them 2.5 more days longer and have them sit there and have it be death by PowerPoint. Right? Steve, your hand's up. What, my friend?
There are a lot of times when clients want to use training, but the process itself is flawed.
Great question.
Do you bundle process mapping and process improvement with the workflow analysis?
Steve, you perfectly said. Yeah, in fact, if I may be candidly, workflow analysis is sort of our branding for process mapping and so on. And again, it's back to vocabulary. I don't know many managers that want process mapping, but I know a lot of managers who want to understand the workflow of their workers. So you see what I'm saying? It's terminology becomes a big deal. Nobody wanted an EPSS when I first started doing this 20 years ago. Nobody, but everybody wants a digital coach. Every employer, every manager I walk up to said, look, if you could give my employees a digital coach in the work that coaches them while they're working, oh, I'm all over that. I tried to sell EPSSs 20 years ago. No one cared. Right? Honestly, we talk in EduTalk way too much. Right? So yeah, and Steve, what I love about this is I can't tell you, I've done hundreds of them, if not thousands in the last 20 years. Here's my favorite thing about that. That's one step of the analysis. That's the first. I can't tell you how many managers who sit in the back and observe, or maybe they're in the room participating. They've come up to me at the end of the day and go, you know what? This is the first time I've ever seen what my people do every day.
Oh yeah, most managers are clueless.
Oh my, they are, Steve. And by the way, not maliciously, but managers aren't often in the work anymore. They're not in the workflow anymore.
And moreover, as the process cuts across the organizational silos, what you end up having are people who have no understanding of how their work affects others, and resulting in name calling and a lot of frustration. And what's neat about this approach is, if I'm understanding what you were saying, there's this element of process mapping where if the part of the process is broken, there's a disconnect of some sort. There's a discussion about how to fix that. And then once that process has gone from an as-is kind of flawed thing to a to-be that we're going to put in place, then it's the to-be that's the model for going through and finishing the workflow analysis, because you don't want to document a shoddy task.
Absolutely spot on, my friend. And let me give you a quick story. I was called into a large manufacturing organization that sold big pumps, like industrial pumps, right? And we were in there because they were launching Salesforce. They were going to launch a CRM into their company. And that was the point of the sword. We want to make sure the CRM implementation goes smoothly. Terrific. Yeah, I get it, right? So I said, before we do that, you probably want that software to be mapping to your sales process. And the SVP of sales was like, oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. we have a sales process here. I said, okay, well, look, give me 3 days. Give me 3 days. Bring your process into the room. Give me some SMEs and workers in the field for 3 days. And let's just vet that process to be sure it works. Oh my gosh. By lunch of the first day, 3 days, lunch of the first day, the SVP in the back of the room literally stands up and says, stop, 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 stop. What are you people doing in the field when you, and what he found out was that although they'd all gone through 3 weeks of sales training, they'd all gotten the sales map, they'd hired Salesforce to map that sales map to the process of the software, their sales reps, 80% or higher, were not following it in the field. Not because they hated it, not because it was bad, but because it did not represent how to do the work. And at the end of the 3 days, there was some knockdown dragouts. There was some you should be doing, no, you shouldn't, all this stuff. But when we got done, Steve, we had a agreed upon, vetted process map of how sales actually happened at that company. And their sales went up 40% in the use of the CRM.
Because you ended up having an integrated workspace where the behavior, the task flow, and the thought flow that went along with the task were those that actually were associated with desired performance, as opposed to, you know, what somebody had supposed that might be.
Guys, this is why, again, be wary of SMEs. I was doing one of these once, and we had a bunch in a large military organization in the States. And we had a whole bunch of leaders in the room. We were doing for leadership training. And these people with badges all over them and medals and stuff filled 2 whiteboards of what a good leader was in this organization. And by the way, no one refuted it because, of course, it's military. But a couple of the people in the room were not leaders yet. These were people who were going to be leaders. We had them in the room as well. And one of them raised their hand. I love this, and said, of course, they said, permission to speak. And then someone else in the room had to say, yeah, you can. And then that person said, I got to tell you something. This is remarkable. Honestly, I hope someday that I am the leader I am seeing on these boards, but I have to raise my hand and say, I don't know what the first 30 days of leadership means. I am terrified about the first 30, 60, 90 days of leadership because people get shot if they lead badly here. I mean, you know, so I hope to aspire to this, but, and it was funny, guys, because the kind of the air went out of the room, and everyone looked at the whiteboard and said, oh my gosh, you know, this is like the future of leaders, but it's not 101 leadership training, which is what we were there to create. Right. So guys, every time I walk out of these, I'm like, holy cow, it just gives me a different lens into what I think we're called to do as learning professionals. Right. And that is to enable performance at every moment of need, not train, certify, compliance, test anybody. Right. And those are means. I get it. But in the end, if the person can't perform based on their role and the context of work, we have failed in our mission. So a new orientation is really important. It's 2 minutes before. Want to give you time. Friends, thanks so much. I hope it's been helpful. Sorry about the technology. No idea what's happening, but I hope I got back fast enough. You've got the recording. You know where I live. And let's keep the dialogue going, please. I know it was quick, but any way I can help, happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Bob. Tony, you want to do some closing comments?
Thank you. Sure. Well, it's been such a great presentation. My mind is, going on and on and on, trying to, thank you so much. I just wanted to, thank everybody for being here, and I just wanted to once again, encourage our participants to learn more about our organization. Of course, I mean, you will receive some, resources and communication also from Bob, and so you can learn more about the work he does. And once again, Yvonne shared my email address with you. So if you're interested in learning more how you can join ISPI Michigan or the ISPI organization, you can please send me an email. And if you have any other questions, please let us know. So it's 12:59, 1 p.m. So I think unless you have other questions or suggestions, please I think we can say thanks to our speaker today, and conclude this presentation.
Thanks, friends. Be safe and well. Be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.